Picture this. Pahalgam, nestled in Jammu and Kashmir. Just serene doesn't even begin to cover it, really. We're talking landscapes that pull in, what, hundreds of thousands of tourists every single year?
Oh, easily. It's stunning.
Baisaran Meadow especially comes to mind.
Yeah.
You know, that classic spot. Picnics, maybe a pony ride.
Yeah, the mini Switzerland. It has that reputation for just calm, peace.
Exactly. The kind of place that just breathes peace.
Truly a jewel of the region. People come from everywhere looking for exactly that respite.
And then, well, April 22nd, 2025. That tranquility was just shattered.
Utterly.
A brutal terrorist attack right there in Pahalgam. 26 lives lost, and most of them tourists.
26. It's just, yeah, one of the deadliest attacks we've seen there in a long, long time.
Sent shockwaves right across India.
Yeah.
Fear, grief, you know.
A profoundly tragic event. And it didn't just claim lives. It also sort of ripped apart that image of the region finding its feet again, finding stability.
Yeah, the scale of it is deeply unsettling. But the impact, it didn't stop at India's borders, did it?
No, not at all. Almost immediately you saw those really tense dynamics with Pakistan flare right back up.
And the world noticed. The U.S. weighed in, calling for what was the phrase? A responsible resolution?
Which flags the international dimension straight away, doesn't it? Kashmir, it's always been this flashpoint with huge geopolitical weight.
Right.
So an incident like this, well, it inevitably triggers global concern, diplomatic maneuvering.
Exactly. So today, that's what we're diving into. We want to try and understand the details of this awful attack.
Look at the reactions from the key players.
Yeah, and try to make sense of the wider repercussions. Because they're still unfolding, really.
Okay, so let's start with the attack itself. That day, that changed Pahalgam.
Let's ground ourselves in the specifics first. The when, the where.
Crucial before we get into the fallout.
Right, so it happened around 2 p.m. Baisaran Meadow.
Middle of the day.
Yeah, can you just picture it? Sun probably out, people just enjoying the view, maybe families having lunch. And then these 4 terrorists appear. We now know 3 identified as Pakistani nationals, 1 local militant, a Dilthokar.
And the weapons.
Yes, AK-47s, and, chillingly, M4 rifles, too. More powerful.
That detail, the M4s, it does make you think, doesn't it? It speaks to their training, maybe access to resources beyond the usual.
It suggests a certain level of sophistication, perhaps? External support?
Potentially. While AKs are sadly common, M4s, they're often linked with more, let's say, specialized units.
And their journey just to get there. I mean, a trek. 20, maybe 22 hours?
From the Kokernag forests?
Yeah, grueling. The commitment to causing such devastation. It's almost, well, it's hard to comprehend.
It really underscores the planning involved, the physical endurance. This wasn't random.
No.
It was calculated, orchestrated. They needed considerable prep and sheer effort to reach that exact spot at that time.
And the attack itself was just merciless. They started by snatching phones.
Right.
Then demanding victims recite the Kalma, a calculated move, clearly, to identify and target people.
A tactic we've seen before, sadly. A horrifying way to sow division, maximize fear.
And then just gunfire.
Yeah.
Indiscriminate. 2 positioned behind shops, apparently shooting 4 people point blank. The other 2 near the zip line area, adding to the chaos, the panic, and tragically, the death toll.
It paints such a grim picture. Coordinated firing from different spots. It would have created utter chaos, made escape almost impossible.
The final count. 26 lives lost. Heartbreaking.
25 Indian citizens, 1 Nepalese national.
Yeah. And we learned about some of them, didn't we? Prashant Sapathy from Odisha, only 41.
And Adil Hussain Shah, a local pony rider.
Right. And Chief Minister Omar Abdullah attended his funeral. That tells you something about the local impact.
It does. These aren't just numbers. They're individuals, families, communities. The fact a local pony rider was among them. It shows how deep this cut.
Absolutely. And you can't talk Pahalgam without tourism. It's the lifeblood.
It was booming, wasn't it, before this?
Totally. 35 lakh tourists in 2024. And by August 2025, they already had 13 lakh bookings lined up. Things were looking up.
Tourism is just fundamental to the J&K economy. Income, jobs, for so many people. Those bookings showed real optimism, confidence returning.
But then the attack happens.
Yeah.
And almost overnight, up to 90% of those bookings gone.
90%. Just vanished.
Hotels fell silent. I read about Javed Ahmad, owns a 20-room hotel. He said one day, every room was full. The next, it was utter silence.
Wow. You can just feel the weight of that.
It really stuck with me. It's not just lost money, is it? It's trust. security. That takes a long time to rebuild.
The ripple effects would have been immediate, catastrophic for the local economy. Not just hotel owners, but shopkeepers, guides, drivers,
Yeah.
everyone connected.
That's an economic shockwave, really. Just ripples through the whole ecosystem. Okay, so the attack, the human cost, the economic blow. What about the immediate international fallout, specifically with Pakistan?
Well, predictably, things deteriorated sharply, very quickly. India, following what's become a familiar pattern after major attacks, was quick to point towards potential Pakistani links.
And the initial blame fell on the Kashmir Resistance Front, label a proxy for Lashkar-e-Taiba.
Yes. Although it's worth noting, both the KRF and Enlati commander Saifullah Khalid, they denied involvement pretty quickly.
So the direct responsibility, publicly at least, was a bit murky initially.
It was. But India's long-standing position, its accusation, has always been that Pakistan offers support, safe havens, to groups operating in Kashmir. That history heavily shaped what came next.
And India's actions were, well, decisive seems an understatement.
Yeah.
Forceful.
Very much so. Revoking all short-term visas for Pakistani nationals, for starters.
With a deadline, April 27th, and threats of penalties, even jail time, for overstaying.
Yeah, we saw the numbers. Over 537 Pakistanis crossed back at the Attari-Wagah border in just 4 days.
It's a lot of lives suddenly disrupted, thrown into uncertainty.
A very strong diplomatic signal from India. Condemnation, yes, but also tangible retaliation.
And it didn't stop with visas. They suspended the Indus Waters Treaty.
Which is huge. That treaty's been vital for water sharing for decades. Suspending it, even temporarily, has massive implications, especially for Pakistan's agriculture.
And they cut staff at Pakistan's High Commission, too.
Right. Reducing diplomatic presence further isolates them, limits communication channels. It felt very deliberate.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's response.
Well, perhaps unsurprisingly, they denied any involvement. Vehemently.
Right. But then, adding fuel to the fire, reports of unprovoked firing along the line of control.
For 4 nights running, apparently. Poonch and Kupwara sectors.
Not exactly de-escalation.
No. Pakistan's denial is pretty standard in these situations, but the Lhasa incidents, well, they just ramped up the tension. More instability, more mistrust.
And then came the military posturing. Almost inevitable, I suppose.
India's Navy test-firing missiles.
A clear signal.
And Pakistan's defense minister making that rather alarming comment about their nuclear arsenal potentially being targeted towards India.
That kind of talk, it really raises the stakes, creates a palpable sense of unease, doesn't it?
It injects a dangerous level of risk, especially when nuclear capabilities are mentioned. It just highlights how urgently de-escalation is needed.
Absolutely. And even in the digital realm, India acted, banning 16 Pakistani YouTube channels.
Including news outlets, but also Shoaib Akhtar's cricket commentary channel.
Yeah, I mean, that seems quite a broad definition of a national security threat.
It reflects that growing trend, though, doesn't it? Governments using digital platforms to control information, shape narratives, especially when tensions are high. Banning a sports figure. It shows how comprehensive that clampdown was.
So tensions are sky high. And that's when the U.S. steps in, April 28th.
Right. The State Department urging both sides towards that responsible resolution.
Felt like the world was kind of holding its breath, hoping things wouldn't spiral completely.
The U.S. often plays that role, or tries to, trying to de-escalate between India and Pakistan. That call reflects wider anxieties about a bigger regional conflict.
And it's a tricky balancing act for them, isn't it? Counterterrorism versus maintaining ties with both nuclear powers.
Exactly. Which sometimes leads to these statements that maybe lack concrete action, breeding a bit of cynicism like we saw on social media.
Yeah, and President Trump, Vice President Vance, they also condemned the attack, voiced support for India. Trump called it a bad one, specifically mentioned the deep-rooted Kashmir issue. Interesting to hear that explicitly mentioned at that level.
His reference to the deep-rooted issue does acknowledge the history, the complexities, the grievances that keep fueling this. It suggests a recognition this isn't just isolated.
But there's this feeling, isn't there, that U.S. leverage might be, well, limited now. Michael Kugelman made that point.
Yeah, the analyst.
Said India's closer ties give the U.S. some influence, sure. But Pakistan's strategic importance means Washington can't afford to alienate them either.
Kugelman's analysis really nails that nuance. The U.S. has big strategic interests with both countries, which limits how strongly they can lean one way or the other. Makes effective mediation really tough.
And the social media reactions to the U.S. involvement were quite sharp.
Yeah, I saw some of those.
Comparing the responsible resolution call to a parent telling kids to sort it out.
Or Trump's bad one comment becoming his new foreign policy metric.
It definitely suggests public cynicism, a sense that maybe external powers can only do so much with these deeply entrenched conflicts.
I think that's fair. There's an awareness of the complexities and maybe the limits of international diplomacy here.
Okay, let's shift back to India. The immediate aftermath there.
Yeah.
Just widespread outrage, but also a real sense of national unity.
Prime Minister Modi came out strong, vowed to hold those responsible accountable, said every Indian's blood is on the boil.
Powerful language, very emotionally charged, aimed at reassuring the nation, projecting strength.
Definitely reflecting that public grief and anger that was just everywhere.
And the government acted on those words. The NIA, the National Investigation Agency, took over the probe immediately.
Right. And then the controversial step of demolishing homes, around 10 linked to suspected militants.
Controversial is the word. It's a tactic used before in the region.
Yes, intended as punishment, maybe a deterrent. But there are huge debates around its effectiveness, the human rights angle, collective punishment concerns.
And interestingly, in Jammu and Kashmir itself, the assembly unanimously condemned the attack. Chief Minister Omar Abdullah, visibly emotional, took personal responsibility for not ensuring tourist safety.
That was significant. You don't often see a leader take personal responsibility like that.
And he explicitly rejected politicizing the tragedy, which felt important, principled.
It did. Underscored the need for empathy, unity, not political point scoring.
And it wasn't just politicians. Local Kashmiris held candlelit vigils, strongly condemned the attack. Leaders like Mirwais Farouk spoke out.
That's crucial to remember. The local population rejects this violence too. Their response counters any narrative that suggests widespread support for terror.
They've suffered immensely themselves over the decades.
Absolutely. Caught in the middle. And this ongoing alienation, the lack of political resolution, it unfortunately creates fertile ground for resentment, makes lasting peace harder.
Across India, we saw protests, solidarity marches, markets shut down in Bhopal.
The Indian diaspora in the U.S. held demonstrations too.
Even actor Atul Kulkarni, who was in Srinagar, appealed to tourists not to give in to fear, to come back. And that viral post from the man in Karnataka who nearly escaped with his family, just a stark personal reminder of the terror.
Those personal stories, the nationwide grief,
Yeah.
it showed a collective resolve against terrorism.
Globally, the condemnation was pretty much universal, wasn't it?
Yeah, Singapore called it heinous. The UN Security Council issued a strong statement.
UK Foreign Secretary spoke with India's External Affairs Minister. India reiterated its zero-tolerance stance, highlighted the cross-border links again.
That international consensus against terrorism is clear, and India, consistently using that cross-border language, reinforces its long-held accusation against Pakistan.
Even Nepal reacted strongly. Protests outside the Pakistani embassy in Kathmandu after losing one of their citizens.
Understandable. It really shows how the human tragedy just radiated outwards beyond the immediate borders.
China, though, took a more measured approach.
Well, given their close ties to Pakistan, yes. Foreign Minister Wang Yi supported Pakistan's sovereignty and security, but also urged restraint from both sides.
A careful balancing act.
Definitely. China has that strong alliance with Pakistan, but also big economic and strategic reasons to want regional stability and decent relations with India, hence the careful wording.
This attack, it just throws the whole unresolved Kashmir conflict back into sharp focus, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. A painful reminder.
For decades, it's been this cycle. Violence, accusations, back and forth. The Indian government's been pushing this normalcy narrative since Article 370 was revoked, pointing to tourism as proof.
Yeah, using those rising tourist numbers as a key indicator.
But this attack, it really exposed how fragile that narrative might be.
Absolutely. Increased tourism is positive, of course, but it doesn't automatically mean the conflict's over or militancy is gone. The deep-rooted issues are still there.
And Praveen Danthi, the analyst, made an insightful point. Just blaming Pakistan might work politically inside India, but does it actually address the underlying grievances within Kashmir?
That's a critical perspective. Focusing only on the external risks obscuring the internal dynamics, the local grievances that need addressing for any kind of lasting peace.
And then you have the Kashmiri people, caught in the middle, as always.
We mentioned their condemnation of the attack. Important.
But rights groups raise concerns about India's response to the home demolitions, the reported detentions of many young men.
A really difficult situation for the local population. Security responses are needed, but heavy-handed tactics risk alienating people further, potentially worsening things.
Omar Abdullah pleaded not to alienate the people of Kashmir further.
It brings you back to that question. Are there alternatives beyond just military and digital responses?
Could genuine dialogue, difficult as it seems right now, be the only real path to long-term safety?
Ultimately, you'd think a sustainable solution has to involve meaningful dialogue, addressing the root causes. Military responses alone probably won't bring lasting peace.
And amidst all this big-picture analysis, we absolutely have to remember the human stories, the courage that emerged.
So important.
Shubham Dwivedi, his wife calling him a martyr for identifying himself as Hindu to try and protect others.
Incredible bravery.
And that Croatian tourist who, despite everything, still felt welcomed. That kind of resilience is just extraordinary.
These stories show that human capacity for compassion, connection, even in the face of unimaginable horror. Powerful reminders of the human cost.
And the dignity of Prashant Sapathi's family, denouncing that fake crowdfunding campaign set up in his name.
Principled.
Or the Ahmedabad tourists praising the Army's quick response, calling them their lifeline.
It shows the spectrum of reactions, doesn't it? How people grapple with trauma, loss, relief, all mixed together.
Exactly. These aren't just headlines. They're real lives, changed forever. So looking ahead, where are we now? Things feel incredibly tense.
They do. The Lhotse is on edge. Both countries seem dug into fairly hardline positions based on their actions and statements.
A precarious environment, high military readiness, limited communication. Lots of room for miscalculation. There are international efforts pushing for dialogue, which is something.
A positive sign, yes. But challenges remain. Upcoming elections in India, internal pressures in Pakistan, these always complicate things.
Makes finding a path to de-escalation really difficult. Leaders might feel pressured to maintain that tough stance domestically.
Exactly. Makes substantive negotiations much harder.
Ultimately, what most people want is just safety.
Peace.
This attack was such a brutal reminder of how fragile that is.
It truly was.
But there is that little glimmer of hope, isn't there? Tourists slowly starting to return to Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes, it shows resilience, both the appeal of the region and the spirit of the local communities. It offers hope that life can eventually find some normalcy again.
So here's a final thought. Maybe a bit idealistic, maybe not. But
Move on.
if India and Pakistan could find just one core principle to genuinely agree on, maybe it could be the absolute need to unite against terrorism, to make sure places like Baisaran Meadow can just be places of peace again, safe, for everyone. Stranger things have happened.
That sentiment, well, it might seem hopeful given the history, but it points to a basic truth. Fighting terrorism is a shared imperative. It transcends borders, politics.
Right.
Safe public spaces benefit everyone, regardless of nationality. It's a fundamental need.
And on that note, perhaps something for you, the listener, to mull over that possibility of a shared need, bridging even the deepest divides.